Hello and welcome. Today we will be reading Youjo Senki Saga of Tanya the Evil, Chapter 4, War College. Last week we finished off Chapter 3, The Watch/Guard of the Rhine. So, beginning for this week. Imperial War College Admissions Committee. It is the appointed time, so I'd like to begin the Imperial War College Admission Committee's third round of reviews. An instructor from the War College is leading the meeting, and the row of committee members are all talented key figures in the Army. The Empire has a long tradition of investing people and time in the selection of the next generation's leaders. The result is outstanding commanders at every level, trained to a high standard of excellence. Today, we'll be reviewing candidates up for re-examination. For that reason, War College admissions are discussed as a matter linked directly to national strategy and defense. Naturally, they spare no effort to discover the ideal candidates, considering multiple future placement options during the process. The Army values diversity, so the committee holds second and third rounds of review with different members for candidates who don't pass. It would be a horrible loss for the Empire if an exceptional candidate were dismissed as unfit. And history has proven that this process is the correct one. Many people, including distinguished officers of both the Army and the Navy, have become central figures in the Army's forces thanks to the multiple stages of assessment. General Moltke, okay, that's M-O with umlauts, L-T-K-E, Moltke? It's either Moltke or Miltke. I'm probably butchering my German here. Anyway, General Miltke the Great is such a fine commander that the reviewer who selected him said the greatest accomplishment of his military life was discovering the magnificent Miltke the Great. But he still received severe criticism to the tune of, quote, "I can't imagine this candidate becoming a soldier," end quote, and only barely managing to squeak by in the third round. As usual, I hope we can make this a lively debate and hear from the perspectives of the front lines, the General Staff, and the War College. And the Imperial War College traditionally chooses to downplay the question of how many rounds it takes someone to pass. Two recent examples are Zatur and Rudersdorf, both selected in the second round. There were apprehensions that the former was, quote, "too scholarly and thus not suited to becoming a general," end quote, while the latter, despite being acknowledged as sharp and dynamic, was criticized for his tendency to daydream. Both of them were accepted after those remarks were made. Nevertheless, the two of them are now treated as geniuses and entrusted with the future of the Army. So much so that they are on the admissions committee. Due to cases like these, it is even said that candidates who pass in the first screening with its very general standards won't amount to very much. The Army is thorough, as evidenced by the way they weed out mere dogmatists and allow people who are dropped in the first round to be accepted in the second or third rounds. We'll start with the request submitted by Major von Legren from personnel to reassess a candidate who passed in the first round. The Empire is so thorough that a candidate accepted in the first round would normally never be deemed unfit. That's why everyone is so confused. For a moment, no one can help but look at the presiding War College instructor with bafflement. The request is to reassess a candidate who already passed the first round and doesn't even require a second. What exactly is Major von Legren trying to say? The War College instructor has to continue the meeting, but he probably doesn't know himself. During the first screening, which is done anonymously to ensure impartiality, the candidate up for review was given a superior rating. The first screening consists of multiple reviewers examining documents from which all personal information about the candidate has been omitted. The reviewers are given only a list of the candidate's achievements and evaluations from their academic advisors and intelligence. That eliminates any bias, which makes it possible to examine the candidate more or less accurately. Eventually, the personal information would be released, and the committee would make their final decision on which officers would advance along the Army's elite track. The screenings have to be strict and fair. Naturally, receiving the best evaluation possible means the candidate lacks nothing, according to the Army. But the Major has objections and has requested a reassessment. We're holding this review in response to that request. The comment indirectly implies that he finds it hard to understand why the reassessment is happening. In all reality, if the request hadn't come from a section chief in personnel who was able to investigate candidates in more detail, it would most likely never have gone through. Previous disputes regarding the suitability of first-round admissions took issue with how ordinary the candidates were. That's why it's no surprise the instructors sounded skeptical. Very few officers received excellent scores in their anonymous evaluations, much less superior. Major von Legren is raising doubts about the top nominee. If the candidate were the child of an influential officer or someone with noble connections, it might make more sense to worry about bias. Cases of suspected favoritism are rare, but they are not unheard of. The candidate in question, however, is the orphan of a soldier. It goes without saying, then, that there are no influential relatives. The ones who made the recommendations had no prior relationship with the candidate. Neither were there any ties to factions or nobility. Not only that, all the recommending officers were straight-laced veterans who had achieved much in the field and never caused any problems. Closing the door on a self-made officer with such outstanding records is not in keeping with the tradition of the military. Everyone turned to Major von Legren for explanation. Major von Legren, I'm curious to know what criteria informed your decision. Looking at the records, I can only conclude he's a fantastic candidate. He sounds somewhat amused, but Brigadier General von Rüdersdorf is voicing the question on everyone's minds. Why? Given the recommendation from his unit, his standing at the academy, the background check from intelligence, the military police investigation report, and his achievements, this officer is exceptional. I wonder what the problem is. Recommendations for achievement exist to select distinguished officers, young, fledgling really, officers, are chosen in the hopes that making the best use of the Army's talent will result in many future benefits. The candidate's unit recommendation consisted of unreserved praise. Academic records reveal a slight lack of practical training compared to some candidates, but superior combat experience made up for that. In terms of simply fitting the requirements, this officer was worthy of being considered a top candidate. And in fact, the review score was nearly perfect. Even intelligence and the military police, who were usually so particular, both came back with the highest praise. How many times had that ever happened? How to say? I believe, and I think many of you agree, that he's one of the most promising candidates we've had in recent years. Uncommonly good. In other words, even Brigadier General von Rüdersdorf, who prides himself in being the contrarian, has a hard time understanding why such a great candidate would be doubted. If the reassessment request hadn't come from one of the top elites in personnel, who was known for his intolerance of flaws, everyone would have shouted him down. True, The candidate has performed at the highest level in every area, but nevertheless, I find this a difficult one to admit. Major von Legren, however, declares that he asked for the reassessment despite acknowledging all the candidate's strengths. He came in second in his class, hasn't made any trouble for the military police, and, according to intelligence, he's a patriot. And they guarantee he can uphold confidentiality. He even got a recommendation from his combat unit, for God's sake. Naturally, to the committee, Legren's objection can only be a joke. To preserve candidate anonymity, decorations and what years they attended the academy were redacted. Let me read that. To preserve candidate anonymity, decorations and what year they attended the academy were redacted. But this one's records are such that they practically guarantee an award of aerial field service badge or better. After all, a recommendation from a command unit requires excellence of both character and skills. If we drop this candidate, we won't be able to admit any new students this year. The solemn comment accurately represents nearly the entire committee's thoughts. Brilliant is the only word to describe a candidate with such ability, achievements, and evaluations. If they were to throw out this one, they would have to disqualify everyone else as well. I've decided to make an exception and reveal the identity of the candidate this time. Please take a look at this. Unable to let things go on like this, the Chief of General Affairs and Personnel hands out the documents in question. As a rule, candidates remain anonymous for reviews, but he has the authority to reveal their identities if circumstances warrant it. He doesn't know Legren well, but he wants to at least give him a hand, even if he's basically doing it in good faith to safeguard the Major's career. The candidate is a rare, and by that I mean that within the most... The candidate is a rare, and that's an understatement, Silver Wings Assault Badge recipient, and was also nominated for an Aerial Field Service Badge for frontline accomplishments. Such an officer would normally be wholeheartedly welcome as a future leader. The problem is that the one who achieved all these things is a child of 11 years of age. Any sensible officer would hesitate to send a little kid into battle. The General Affairs Director figures Legren as opposing her advancement due to her age. That is about as much as he understands of the situation, but he agrees to declassify the information. You mean a kid did all these things? Her age is enough to stun even Rudersdorf. By that point, it seems that everyone understands how abnormal this is. The room abruptly quiets down in confusion and astonishment. She became a magic first lieutenant at age 11, graduated from the academy second in her class, received the Silver Wings Assault Badge and was recommended for the Aerial Field Service Badge, was recognized as an ace of aces with 62 downed, plus 32 assists, and nicknamed White Silver. And she's working in the instructor unit? They wondered if they should all laugh. A resume like that makes her a prodigy. Cultivating magic officers is a pressing matter, but her age gives you pause, correct? More than a few of the committee members feel that she is far too young. They aren't sure they can entrust her with command of a whole battalion. More importantly, even though there has long been demand for more magic officer training, some people criticize magic officers as short-sighted. Yes, she may be a competent magic officer, but whether we can use her as a commander is a different question. Excelling in a highly specialized field is hard enough. Plenty of aerial mages boast outstanding individual capacities, but surprisingly few of them make decent commanders. No, a magic officer's high competency doesn't necessarily make them a great superior. Not all famous athletes become great coaches. The qualities required for commanders are far different from the ones it takes to be an individual ace. Thus, some of the officers interpret Legren's doubt as a response to the girl's age and ability level. From those angles, there is indeed room for debate. But her reviewers dismiss those concerns. She's plenty talented, and her achievements, unit recommendations, and so on, fit the requirements perfectly. she has nothing to find fault with. Her records include her experience leading a platoon with no mistakes. Well, if she couldn't even lead a platoon, there wouldn't be any point in officer training. More people than you might expect get tripped up there. That said, at this point, considering her unit recommendation, it wouldn't be right to express doubts as far as her command ability was concerned. She's an officer from the accelerated training program. Her tactical knowledge might be too specialized. Maybe it would be better for her to do advanced officer schooling first. Some of the generals still raise doubts. She took an accelerated course, after all. Even if she can put what she knows to use in actual combat, she could have holes in her knowledge. Regardless of whether she can give simple instructions at the tactical level, does she have the appropriate skills to give commands that take complex situations into consideration? It's only common sense to wonder. But the reviewers who rated her so highly during the anonymous screening stand their ground. Her graduation thesis was, quote, "the logistics of the swift deployment," end quote. The railroad department thought very highly of it. As to her graduation, there is already proof that she is capable of debating strategic issues, the thesis in question. For a cadet to write on such a subdued topic was rare. Usually they preferred something more rousing. Considering the results she had attained on the battlefield, it was even stranger. During the anonymous review, everyone figured the candidate had to be someone with extensive field operation experience, if they could write logistical analysis like that. Anyone who read it would assume it was written by an expert and think no more of it. And when people who knew logistics read it, they were impressed all the more by the superior writing and viewpoint, even if they didn't want to admit it. The outline was simple and clear. She emphasized gathering resources and said that supply lines should be secured through depot organization and a standardized distribution process. She argued that efficiency should be a top priority with the goal of eliminating all long-term storage, except for emergency supplies. After her criticism of hoarding resources in the rear, she proposed a way of managing essential materiel that would support continuous combat on the front lines. Apparently, it was common knowledge in logistics that the railroad department had read it, loved it, and practically begged for her to be assigned to the team. In fact, a number of skilled field officers reviewed the paper and gave it high praise. They said that anyone who had ever launched an offensive from the front line and run out of supplies had a keen understanding of where it was coming from. Rudersdorf, always worrying about operational logistics himself, was no exception. No one assessing the anonymous candidate would have ever imagined that she was only 11 years old. Sorry, one thing. I hadn't given much thought to who wrote it, since information about the author was classified, but it wasn't a research report from the War College? No. She wrote it in the academy. Excuse me, but do you really think any further deliberation is required? I can't see the need for it myself. If she can debate on topics in logistics, it's hard to call her short-sighted. Rudersdorf cocked his head. The longer the discussion dragged on, the better the candidate looked, and the fewer reasons to doubt her remained. Then, and perhaps it is to be expected, Brigadier General von Zetour breaks his silence, looking as if he can no longer stand idly by. He doesn't particularly raise his voice, but his tone is dissatisfied, to be sure. Here's a question. It appears that the candidate personally received a recommendation to advance to War College from Brigadier General von Volkov? V-A-L-K-O-V. It's either Volkov or Volkov. During her field training as a cadet, but personnel rejected it. Can someone explain what happened? As far as Zetour can see, aside from her age, First Lieutenant Degrachoff is an excellent candidate and fits the bill with no problem. She even received high evaluations from some officers while she was still a cadet. Volkov admired her performance in the conflict zones so much that he recommended her for War College admission. Though Zetour had only met him in person a handful of times, he sensed the man's intelligence during those conversations, and it was hard for him to imagine that Volkov would make a deeply erroneous recommendation. And furthermore, as far as he can tell, she was regarded highly throughout her entire career, and her abilities have never been doubted before. Why wasn't she reviewed at that point? Who rejected her? I rejected her for her age and lack of achievements. Zatur nods as if he expects Legren's answer and turns a stern eye on him. Major von Legren? Yes, what can I do for you, sir? I don't want to go on a tangent questioning your impartiality, so setting aside the initial rejection, why did you request this reassessment? Legren's objection is so problematic his fairness is being called into question. Zatur doesn't outright say it, but everyone is wondering the same thing. She has so much talent, so many achievements. She is an outstanding officer. How could he possibly doubt her? Because I have serious qualms about Lieutenant Degrichev's character. Legren can't shake a bad feeling he has about her. His experience assessing numerous officers tells him something is off, and that uneasiness has solidified into a deep distrust. He is determined not to let this abnormal girl be appointed to the heart of the Imperial Army. Are you saying that despite knowing she scored extremely high on both her psychiatric evaluation and the intelligence test of her ability to maintain confidentiality? Yes, sir. Of course, she would pass both the psychiatric evaluation and intelligence assignments. Not only that, she might even be religious enough to get complimented on her piousness by a priest. Most soldiers wouldn't ask God for forgiveness in the middle of a fight. Still, that only means no one has been able to detect her abnormalities. Are you questioning the results of the tests? That's right, but I don't doubt the tests themselves. I concede that the results are adequate. I'm sure the tests all came up with the right numbers. That's not what was abnormal about her. Well, I understand the issue anyhow. That psychiatric evaluation is meant to test adult military professionals, not weirdos like her. So I'm sure those numbers are the result of a fair and carefully conducted test. And that's precisely what's abnormal. Major von Legren, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind you that everything you say will go on record, and then ask you to confirm something. Yes, sir. For Legren, both going on record and doing major damage to his career are frightening prospects. Really, as one of the best, racing down the elite track, he would rather avoid these sorts of entanglements. But he has to say something. The urge has taken hold of him. His entire body, his very soul, warns him of something like a natural enemy to him and as a human being, something alien, an abnormality that can't be allowed to continue to exist. Why do you doubt Lieutenant Degrichev's character? I've seen her 3 times. The first time, he thought she was an outstanding officer candidate. The second time, he thought she was a terrifying officer candidate. And the third time, he was sure she was an insane officer candidate. In an official capacity or privately? All 3 times came about due to my military duties. I saw her 3 times during inspections of the military academy. There is probably no cadet who has made a deeper impression on me, and there probably never will be. She's at least abnormal enough that I can say that. Cool-headed and logical, patriotic and egalitarian, devoutly religious yet liberal. Though all of those are praiseworthy qualities for a person to have, she's warped. Something about her is strange and twisted. Are you claiming that she's done something wrong, or did you say something? Please look at the remarks from her instructors. The word abnormal is scribbled at the top. Her academic advisor, who had interacted with her the most, had left an interesting memo. Though he gave her excellent scores in every area, he'd scribbled the word abnormal as a personal note. Was it her character that had made him uneasy? Instructors often pointed out students' deficiencies, but writing simply abnormal seemed unthinkable. So there is a reason. Please explain. Even Zatur relaxed his accusatory stance and shows he is willing to listen, although it is only because he feels it necessary to confirm the facts from an impartial point of view. She's abnormal. I've never seen an officer candidate with a fully formed personality and perspective with regards to people as which regards people as objects. She's just like a perfected machine. She takes orders and carries them out to the letter. An ideal officer. Despite that, she understands reality. I've never heard her spout any pointless theories. I just can't believe she's normal. And that's why she was capable of what I witnessed when I saw her that third time. Did you ever think it might be some quirk of a genius's mind? She definitely comes off as a genius in combat, in fact, General von Falkhoff and Intelligence jointly recommended her for the Iron Cross Second Class. More than anything, something about that kid as a newly commissioned officer just seems wrong. Legren exercised his full authority to investigate and found indications that she had participated in actual combat even before she was commissioned as a second lieutenant. There were very few clues, but when he put them together, his suspicions of her involvement in an intelligence operation deepened. The recommendation may have been dismissed during the application processing stage, but they wouldn't have nominated her for an Iron Cross Second Class for no reason. You mean during her field training? This surprises everyone, and a stir goes through the room. It is difficult to believe, no matter what, but the rapid growth of her career over such a short time lends it credence. During her field training, in other words, when she was 9, this child saw action and came out of it with a nomination for an award. If they heard it anywhere else, they would write it off as a bad joke. The abnormalities here is this nonsense coming up during a review of candidates who may hold the abnormality here is this nonsense coming up during a review of candidates who may hold the future of the army on their shoulders. When I grilled intelligence, they hinted that they might have involved her in some kind of top-secret operation. A border conflict zone. It is a rather dangerous place for an officer candidate to go field training, but, well, still probably fine, but the long-range penetration training makes even the hardiest soldiers scream, and doing it in an actual enemy territory? A march in full combat gear in the middle of the night to an isolated, friendly base across land crawling with barbarians. You'd never expect a cadet to lead that sort of operation. Legren wrung the information out from an acquaintance from intelligence, and even he had assumed it was run by a battle-tested warrant officer. Well, it may make sense. It was only natural that intelligence would look to such a capable leader for help. They probably never dreamed she was a cadet doing field training. Now Legren had a hunch that the medal application was withdrawn after they belatedly realized that Tanya was only an officer candidate. You mean to say that a cadet was involved in a field operation that led intelligence to apply her for her decoration? By now, no one can ignore how anomalous she is. The intelligence officers fend off glares by shaking their heads as if they know nothing about it. But it's common knowledge that intelligence's right hand doesn't know what its left hand is doing. They had to know that they'd come up with something if they were investigated. Their faces became awfully pale a few moments ago. If possible, I'd like to get that information declassified. I'll check on it. And, if that's it, I'm pretty sure she's just an outstanding officer. We'll ascertain the truth of this matter. That's what the chairman means, but he's already convinced. That is why none of this makes sense to him. Why is Legren so skeptical about an officer with whom, aside from her age, they have no issues, not with achievements, performance, or anything else? While attending the academy, she pulled a magic blade on someone for insubordination. Isn't it the senior cadet's responsibility to smack the rebels into shape? To come out and say it, although military law prohibits taking punishments into one's own hands, there are unwritten rules. For example, injuries incurred during training are quote-unquote accidents, and they happen quite commonly in sparring matches against upperclassmen. It's not a nice way to say it, but if the committee is going to punish her for that, almost half of the army deserves some kind of similar criticism. She really meant to pry his head open. If the instructor hadn't stopped her, she would have turned an able soldier into a disabled person. Legren suppressed the urge to shout. "No, this is different," and explains. He knows no one could possibly understand unless they were there. "Major, if we believed everything the trainers said, the army would be full of corpses by now." Trainers hurling excessively harsh words at new recruits was business as usual for the army. Of the verbal abuse Marines and aerial magic officers hurled as recruits during drills, "I'm gonna kill you," was still on the cuddly side, to say the least. In the army, it wasn't rare to see instruction that completely rejected a student's worth as a human being and utterly degraded them into a dog. Nobody bats an eye when threats like, "I'm going to crack your head open and I'm going to blast your empty head off," echo out over the training grounds. And corporal punishment isn't just endorsed, it's actively carried out. Even if she tended to go to extremes, there's a bit of a mean evaluation. Considering her age, you could say she has great self-control. If it were only words and some threats, frankly, if that were all, most of them would go by what they knew and think it was cute. But they hadn't seen her with their own eyes. Actually, they probably even think they are being considerate by not court-martialing people for every failure to obey. After all, disobeying a superior officer can, at worst, result in capital punishment by firing squad. To put it a different way, they believe it's kinder for the new recruits, who might not have great judgment, to punch them out rather than execute them. Well, if your worries are her age and capacity for self-control, then I suppose I understand. They aren't going to change their minds at this point. Everyone can agree there is an issue with her age. Coming down hard on a new recruit, as the major commented, may have been overkill, but it was still within bounds of the permissible. And it isn't as if they don't understand his concerns about her unusual ability. But actually, by putting her through War College, they can offer her education in areas she lacks and grow her into a remarkable, competent officer. That much is certain, they think. Major von Legren, your views are too subjective. Yes, I must say you're lacking in objectivity. Despite all the debate and reservations, she will be admitted. I recognize that you were trying to be fair. I'm surprised that someone like you would get so caught up in superficial impressions. Well, nice investigating, everyone. We'll have to grill intelligence. No one understands that he brought her up as a problem in earnest. Most of the committee thinks he took this tact as an indirect way to criticize intelligence. With the way the army politics works, a personnel section chief can't very well censor them openly. Everyone is sure, though they don't state it outright, that he requested this reassessment in order to bring up this murky business he discovered while conducting his review of the candidate. The evaluation from intelligence reflected some sort of secret operation in the past. Certainly, in that case, it would partially have been an oversight on his part, but discovering it would work to his credit. And instead of going after him, intelligence would end up having to issue an apology. In other words, the main thing that would register for people was that the personnel section chief did his homework. Basically, he had managed to remain impartial while questioning intelligence's secrecy. Nice work, Major von Legren. We're not going to reassess her, but we will talk to intelligence again. Thank you, sir. And so, Contrary to Legren's intentions, no one tries to stop the candidate's admission. Tanya's days continue on the upwardmost line of the Rhine front in the west, being woken up at any time and thrown into interception missions. As she gets splattered with mud and blood, the smell of gun smoke clinging to not just her hair but her entire body, she is promoted to first lieutenant. The raise in base pay, though small, is a good thing, but the part that makes her ecstatic is the accompanying notice that she has been admitted to War College. Luckily, perhaps it should be said, First Lieutenant Schwarzkopf assures her that, considering Corporal Serebryakov's proven combat ability, he will recommend her for the officer track so that Tanya can go to War College with no worries. She is glad she can get away without acting like she cares about her subordinate. She's glad she can get away without acting like she cares about her subordinate. Okay, that's poorly translated. Anyway, as for the notice itself, getting recommended for admission to the War College is truly an honor. So that's so much that it's a dream come true. To be eligible, you have to be at least a first lieutenant, so she doesn't even qualify at the moment. Apparently, some commendable personage nominated her when recommending her for achievement. Mentally, giving thanks to personnel for their mysterious workings, she naturally accepts the enrollment, which means a transfer to safety in the rear. And so, First Lieutenant Tanya Degrichov, 11 years old on paper, has a second opportunity, at least in her subjective memory, to enjoy the life of a college student. To the world, she must look like she just skipped a few grades, but in reality, it's my second round of college. From my perspective, it won't be very hard to fit in. Strictly speaking, of course, a war college is quite different from a typical university, in terms of both educational mission and curriculum. But in Tanya's view, it means getting to study in the rear, blessed with 3 hot meals a day and a hot bath to soak in. What a comfortable life compared to the front lines. And to Tanya, a war college and a university are essentially the same thing. As long as I can use signaling theory to market her value as a human capital, there is no difference between the two. Not only that, my theory is that war college is even better than a normal university in some ways. Certainly, in terms of Tanya's professional future, it's a sweet deal to not only not pay tuition, but also get paid by the state to go and have a career track all laid out for her at the end of it, guaranteed. So War College freshman First Lieutenant Tanya Degrichov merrily devotes herself to her studies. Though an elementary school backpack would be more appropriate to someone of her stature, she seems strangely comfortable in her military uniform carrying her officer's bag. Ever since her experiences in the war zones, she can't get away without her standard-issue rifle and computation orb. So, after finishing a few routine tasks, she grabs those as well and heads off for another day at school. Of course, she knows she's supposed to bring writing utensils to campus, not her rifle. Insert school shooter joke here. Whatever. If only. Anyway. Still, at some point, she started to feel incomplete without her gear within reach. She never knows when there will be a chance to shoot the mad scientist, a rabid believer, or being X dead. Therefore, she feels it's both imperative to consider everywhere a battlefield and be ready to seize any opportunity and impossible not to. Yes, her battlefield is everywhere. That's precisely why the War College accepts even a little skip-grader kid like her so naturally. Even if it isn't her intention to look tough, it's difficult to make light of an officer back from the field wearing the Silver Wings assault badge and constantly exuding that battlefield tension. On top of that, she uses her free time to disassemble her rifle and give it a good cleaning, unconsciously gritting her teeth, dreaming of the moment she will kill Being X. and her response when another officer notices her and asks why she always carries her rifle is definitive. Looking up with a perplexed expression that makes her seem her age, she says, "I may have to stake my life on this equipment at any moment, so I can't relax until I have it with me, i.e., because I'm a coward." "You mean you don't feel safe unless it's within reach?" "Yes, sir. Something like that. Please consider it the childish habit of a baby who won't let go of her favorite blanket and laugh." Yes, that's probably enough to leave a solid impression. Thus, it doesn't take long for everyone to perceive First Lieutenant Tanya Degrichov as less a child than a soldier back from the front lines. That is, they treat their classmate as a frightening but reliable fighter who smiles as she discusses national defense, arguing about the best ways to slaughter enemy troops. "Morning, Mr. Lyken? Lyken? L-A-E-K-E-N. Lyken. Good morning, Mr. Lyken." I only realize she's approaching when I hear her voice. I really can't even sense her. I do have a little combat experience, but I guess I've gotten pretty soft compared to the officers just back from the front. Or is she simply that great of a soldier? "Good morning, Lieutenant Degrichov. Beg your pardon, but do I see you still have your rifle with you today?" Sorry, "Good morning, Lieutenant Degrichov. Beg your pardon, but do I see you have your rifle again today?" In my time as a warrant officer, I've seen a lot of commissioned officers, but probably none of them have as bright a future as she does. She's barely over 10 and enrolled in the War College, which they say is unheard of. Well, it's incredible that a kid that young would even have enough career experience to be a first lieutenant in the first place. But I guess the world's a big place, and these are troubled times. I was just as good as everyone else on the battlefield, but here's an officer who can get around my back. Lieutenant Degrichov is clearly not the type of officer you can judge by looks. I hear she brings her rifle and computation orb to school every day, and leaves them with the on-duty commander of the guard. The reason she can't be without her weapons must be related to her combat experience. There are some guys who come back and have psychological issues that don't let them leave their weapons. But her case seems different. She doesn't seem like she would be particularly nervous without them. Basically, she's making a habit of carrying her weapons. That means she must be ready to do battle at any time, but, and I'm repeating myself a bit, she did receive the Aerial Field Service Badge very young. She's well trained and addresses non-coms properly. Next time I'm on the battlefield, I won't separate enemy soldiers out by age. If I don't shoot, I might die. I'll count that as one lesson learned. Yeah, it's embarrassing, but apparently habits die hard. I know the feeling. Until I finally got used to sleeping in the moonlight, I was always unconsciously looking for cover. I knew I was safe, but the habits you created while you're fighting for your life don't fade so easily. Not at all. I think it's wonderful. Actually, it means she has a good grasp on the important things on the battlefield. Understanding those while keeping a grip on your sanity is a test for green second lieutenants. So that's like new ones. On the battlefield, harsh reality crushes the rules they believe in. Bravery, glory, honor, all those ideals get covered in mud and blood as they fight to the death, and a handful of exceptions make a name for themselves. Only a handful of exceptions make a name for themselves. The secret that those few know is that it's not so hard. All they have to do is listen to what the non-coms have to say and offer opinions that will garner them respect and admiration. But there are really almost no officers who can do that. Thanks for someone working their way up. Nothing makes me happier than some reassurance. That's why I have to look past this little girl's exterior, honor who she is, and assist her with sincerity. If an officer can appreciate the effort it takes to climb the ranks, they grow. Understanding that fact, I faithfully fulfill my duties as commander of the guard and pay respect to the small yet illustrious first lieutenant. But with all due respect, Lieutenant, may I ask what brings you here today? As you know, today is an off day. There aren't any classes. It's what is generally known as the Sabbath, in other words, Sunday. Most pious believers go to church, and some go to confession. I hear this first lieutenant is often praying in earnest at church in the morning. Actually, I've seen her staring raptly at an icon more than once. Yes, it's something straightforward. I want to use the library. The reference room in the dorm simply isn't satisfactory. Although it's an incredibly simple observation, Lieutenant Digrichoff is really, truly hard-working. Even the grumpy-headed librarian commends her knowledge. Even the grumpy-headed librarian commends her knowledge, curiosity, and desire to learn. So I guess this girl is the epitome of what a soldier should be. I even heard from my former superior that the General Staff's strategy section was blown away by her analysis of the lesson of war and re-examination of basic tenets. I wonder what she's got crammed in that little head of hers. She truly does impress me. I beg your pardon. Then, as usual, please leave your weapons here before making your way in. Normally, it's too much of a fuss to look after officers' personal effects. Keeping an eye on them takes effort, so I don't usually want to do it. But this first lieutenant is different. A soldier has no greater friend on the battlefield than her rifle. And for a mage, their computation orb is just as invaluable. Watching over these is an honor, so I don't even notice the workload. Thanks. Then if you'll excuse me. After quickly filling in the application and accepting the proof of storage receipt with a practiced hand, Lieutenant Digrichoff proceeds onto campus. I glance after her, and even from behind, I can see that although her stride is small, she steps with confidence. Her narrow shoulders seem incredibly broad. The thought that such an officer trusts me enough to handle her brothers in arms, to hand over her brothers in arms with no hesitation, makes me happy in spite of myself. So he's referring to her gun and computation orb as brothers in arms. Lofty. She's an awkward, cheeky little bedwetter. She's an awkward, cheeky little bedwetter. God, I could picture like an Australian accent when somebody says that, but in any case. But an idiot shows up to rain on my parade. He doesn't understand how lucky I feel. It's amazing that she's a commissioned officer so young, and this bozo doesn't possess anything to commend him on beside his age. Are you stupid? She may look young, but it's not piss she smells like. She's got the scent of combat around her, gun smoke and blood. So even a sergeant with combat experience can be this naive. Achieving that level of perfection as a soldier takes enough skill and love for battle to rival the old-timers. To put it a different way, even if you despise war as a human being, there has to be something about it that you love, or you'll never be able to understand her. Sergeant, is that all you think about her? Huh? No. Of course I think she'd make a great officer. Of course she will make a great officer. If she were my battalion commander, I'd gladly follow her, whether on an assault or breaking up a penetrating enemy force, performing delaying action, or even rearguard duty. I'd follow her anywhere. War loves her, and so too do we. She'll make her mark. Her whole unit is sure to get the highest honors, I'm convinced. I know because I've observed so many officers in the past. She's what they call a future hero. Pay attention, moron. She carries 2 computation orbs, but she only gave you 1. But there's no use trying to explain that to a numbskull like this. She turned in her rifle and backup computation orb as a compromise to respect my duties. It's virtually her right to keep the other orb, the one she's used to the most. So yeah, I don't feel like pointing that out to a guy who doesn't even notice that I tacitly allowed her to take it because I understood. Maybe she kept it unconsciously, but boy, she doesn't let her guard down. If the officer of the week finds out, there'll be trouble. Ah, is that still all you think of her? Tanya's mental state as she walks the increasingly familiar War College campus is a bit complicated. As usual, if a human loses their sense of shame, they become shameless, which is dishonorable to a social creature. In that sense, being ashamed is a phenomenon that is particular to social creatures. Which is why, how embarrassing. Though I'm intent on revenge, I know I can't be proud of carrying my rifle with me everywhere. So after an instructor indirectly kidded me for it, I've taken to leaving my firearm with the commander of the college guards. Tanya's compromises by carrying a combat knife specially made for non-magic battles, so she's never completely unarmed. Still, it would be a lie if I said the way they look at me when I go to turn in my weapons doesn't bother her. I don't like being exposed to their amused glances, as if I'm some weirdo under observation. But considering they have a point, there is nothing I can do about it. Maybe it's her imagination, but I can't help but feel the guards are laughing at me. Here's that dork again, bringing her rifle to school. But Tanya can't grasp why they might stare at a fully outfitted mage wandering around the rear. I can't get upset if it's something I would do myself. Still, I have a reason for always being prepared that I can't tell anyone else. It's a simple issue of dignity. If my rational mind gets buried in faith, my sense of self will fade. I can just see myself becoming Being X's toy if I don't keep my raison d'etre clear. Editor's note: raison d'etre, a reason to exist, the firm line demarcating you as you, and such is originally sourced from the French language. Anyway, I can just see myself becoming Being X's toy if I don't keep my raison d'etre clear. This guy calling himself God has a lot of time on his hands if he's playing with dolls, but the one being played with isn't going to stand for it. I will not stand for it. So to clarify and renew her knowledge of her enemy, Tanya has been going to the nearest church on Sundays for a while now, and cultivating her hatred before a false idol of Being X. Inside her, a chorus of curses joins her unbound loathing, a healthy state of mind. That is the individual Tanya Degrachev's response to the manipulator of humans, Being X. She takes her rifle with her so that if a chance materializes, she can shoot him in the face. But unfortunately, she never runs into him here. Of course, I know that's an unproductive way for Tanya to spend her time. Even so, if I neglect the practice, it's possible the Elenium Type 95's curse will turn Tanya into a pious believer. She needs to take care of her mental hygiene. It's an unavoidable necessity to ensure her mind abhors the mere image of Being X. Slacking off on that would be the same as slacking off on breathing or abandoning thought. So we don't want to be dolls. Tanya has an unwavering belief that human dignity lies in thinking. The human race, evolved from apes, feels that thought is what sets them apart from other species and makes them truly human. That is why she can't understand why believers assume they are blessed and abandon rationality. The moment a person loses the capacity to think, to question, Tanya considers them no longer human but machine. And that is why the individual, Tanya Degrachev, reveres thought, loves debate, and sneers at the dogmatism from the bottom of And that is why the individual Tanya Degrichov reveres thought, loves debate, and sneers at the dogmatism of religious fundamentalists from the bottom of her heart. So of course she laughs at the fanatics, the blind believers. She can't stand that those dumbasses are just like the blind followers of communism and other dogmas, essentially another type of religion, who built mountains of corpses through social experimentation. The feeling stems from her views on humanity. Thinking is sacred because trial and error is inherent to existence. When unthinking people force their dogmatism on others, she wonders how stupid the world could be. Being X, who is trying to make her the vanguard of that sort of dogmatism, is nothing but her sworn enemy. She can't allow him to remain in this world. That said, she is still rational enough to realize that spending all her time building up her hatred is unproductive. So for the time being, she will set aside that, and push ahead with her studies. Tanya is ambitious, in the sense that she's doing what she can do for now, with her eyes on the future. Hence the frequent library visits. She walks down the already familiar halls, exchanges salutes with the staff she knows, and heads straight for the library. First Lieutenant Degrichov, please come in. She puts her hand to the library door. First Lieutenant Degrichov, coming in, she announces. She puts her hand to the library door after giving the usual notice of her arrival. Since a rank of at least first lieutenant is required for admission into the War College, she's simply the lowest of the low. Although it is Sunday, it wouldn't be strange for some others to have arrived ahead of her. There could be superior ranking officers inside, so she always has to conduct herself smartly. Tanya's daily efforts to extend the proper courtesies are rewarded. A soldier with a scholarly air and nearing old age looks up from a mountain of resources as she walks in. The insignia on his shoulders indicates he is a brigadier general, and, judging from his clothing, probably an important one. The fact that one of his rank would be there digging through maps and records, well, it's unsurprising considering the quality of the materials at the War College. Research for military strategy always ends up dependent on the War College library. When one of the higher-ups needs some data, they often visit. There are mountains of records and papers that aren't allowed to leave the premises. If they want to browse those materials, they have to come in person. Please excuse the interruption, General. Tanya chuckles to herself in her head at this one-in-a-million chance meeting. No matter the era, it never hurts to have friends in high places. And if you are trying to meet people, it's essential to go out and increase your chances. That said, it's a terrible shame that my external age is so young. It makes me hesitant to go anywhere alcohol could be employed. Obviously, if such a little girl were present, anyone would have a hard time enjoying their drinks. It would defeat the entire purpose of the adventure. On the other hand, she's able to make a good impression by having her act so put together at such a young age. It is difficult for me to capitalize on her appearance, because I have to consciously behave like a child, though. Children are already another universe I don't understand. So little girls might as well be alien life forms. So she can smile in a pinch, but that's about it. Now that she's blessed with an opportunity, she will not hesitate to take full advantage. Oh, you can just treat me like an older alum, that's I guess an abbreviation of alumni, for the moment. The man who returns her salute sounds less like a soldier and more like a philosopher who would be more at home doing research. He's probably straight-laced in some sense, but as far as she can tell, he seems friendlier than bad-tempered. I'm assuming they mean he seems more friendly than bad-tempered. That's not translated properly. Next page. That's page 219. Let's see. Thank you, sir. My name is Tanya Degrichov. I'm a student here, and I was granted the rank Magic First Lieutenant by the Empire. I'm Brigadier General von Zatur, Deputy Director of the Service Corps in the General Staff Office. The Service Corps in the General Staff Office? He's one of the top dogs in the rear. I'm so lucky. It's an honor to meet you, General. She's pretty sure that she can say that and mean it. After all, they have about as much clout as the guys who run general staff personnel. In an operation, they'd be the ones running administrative strategy. The only word for this chance to meet an off-duty officer from there is lucky. Lieutenant. Are you in a hurry right now? Not in particular, sir. I'm here for the purpose of self-study to acquire knowledge. She manages to control herself and obediently states her purpose instead of jumping up and down. Luckily, her need to satisfy her intellectual curiosity and errands to research laws and ordinances, Luckily, between her need to satisfy her intellectual curiosity and errands to research laws and ordinances, she is here quite frequently, so it isn't out of the ordinary. Great. If you'll give me a moment of your time, I'd like to get a younger person's opinion on something. How about it? Gladly, sir. If I'm not interrupting. No, it's fine. Relax. Yes, sir. Perfect. He's interested in me, too. It's so much easier to talk to someone when they're interested. This will be infinitely better than giving a presentation on personnel cutbacks to a bunch of execs who oppose the idea because they don't understand the necessity. I can bypass all of the lower tier. I can bypass the little fish to reach the top guy, is what she's saying. I've heard a bit about you. It seems you've been quite busy. My reputation is undeserved, sir. The agonizingly annoying nickname White Silver has convinced me the Army needs to reconsider its taste in names, but apparently it does attract attention. It seems like getting some name recognition will be good for my career. Career as a young elite, although the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. I need to keep an eye out for ways to keep my frame under control. I think everyone intends it as a fitting appraisal. Oh, but let me ask you this. And apparently, even false reputations can contribute to the good first impression. Even if it is just a casual whim of this brigadier general, who has taken a slight interest in Tanya, he is going to ask her perspective. Lieutenant, you can give me your subjective opinion. How is this war going to turn out? What's your view? Two soldiers having a conversation about the state of the war. Well, that's a kind of military small talk. Sticking to safe topics isn't a bad idea, according to common thinking. But he's taken an interest in me. If I can give him an honest opinion, he'll see me as motivated. Of course, the barrier to entry is having something smart to say. That's a very broad question, sir. So showing that I'm both assertive and deliberate by confirming the aim of his question is critical. In the military, everyone will like you if you consult with your superior officers often and report everything. If you don't know something, admit it and ask. That kind of attitude seems particularly useful in the Army. These imperial soldier creatures have a tendency to be bizarrely obsessed with accuracy. Since that's how it is, instead of trying to gain points, I'll put effort into not losing them. You can't get promoted just by speaking up. You need to pay attention to the minute details and make your voice heard. You're right. Allow me to rephrase it. What shape do you think this war will take? My apologies, sir, but I don't believe I'm in position to comment. And you should always stop yourself from commenting on things outside your duties. For example, Human resources shouldn't butt into the affairs of sales business, just as sales shouldn't butt into human resources business. It's important to know your place. It's all right. This isn't an official consultation. Just tell me what you think. Then with your permission, sir. I really don't want to say anything, but refusing any further would be rude. It would be worse than anything to come off as someone too inept to have anything to say. Remaining silent and expecting him to understand would be naive, a super dreadnought class fantasy. Human beings have 2 ears but only 1 mouth. In other words, when dealing with someone who is willing to listen, 1 mouth is plenty. Unless you open it, your ideas have no chance of getting across. I'm sure it will turn into a world war. Rule number 1 of making a good first impression, or presentation for that matter. Declare estimates with confidence. And while it's important to be creative, making sure your forecast is reliable. A presentation is meaningless if your points don't reach your audience. World war? I believe most of the major powers will become involved, so the fighting will take place on a global scale. Will this be this world's first world war? Well, there's no mistaking that the major powers are going to have a serious fight. It's definitely going to be big. In that case, perceiving it as a world war is only common sense. World powers will clash with one another, seeking hegemony. Each side will fight like they mean it for sure. So showing I'm not taking things lightly, that I'm facing reality, is more likely to work in my favor. What makes you say that? Though the Empire is an emerging state, compared to the existing powers, we boast quite an advantage. It's also important to avoid convoluted explanations. The only way to prevent pointless meetings is to thoroughly establish common understanding. In that case, this Brigadier General seems very smart, so much so that I'm surprisingly open-minded of him to have a conversation this serious with In that case, this Brigadier General seems very smart, so much so that it's surprisingly open-minded of him to have a conversation this serious with a first lieutenant. But then, that's precisely why he's worth talking to. If we were to fight each nation one-on-one, we would surely come out victorious. Right. Against the Republic we could win. He said the hard part for me. Against the Republic. Can mean it might not hold true in other cases. Since the superior officer hinted at their other potential enemies, it's easier to continue the conversation. Genuinely impressed by that nuance, Tanya realizes she is perhaps talking a bit much. She even senses that in the army, where you don't really get to choose your subordinates, they invest in their juniors more than in the corporate world. This perspective was impossible for me to have had when I was doing layoffs in human resources. So I should take this lesson to heart. In the army, unlike in a company, you don't get to choose your subordinates. All you can do is educate them. But actually, it's difficult to imagine the Commonwealth and the Russi Federation simply standing by. It's not such about the kingdom of... I'm not sure about the kingdom of Ildoa or Idolia, something along those lines. Hard to pronounce. I'll go with Ildoa for now. They shouldn't have any direct interests in the current war. And with that, Tanya reconfirms what is already obvious. Yes, this is good. This is fantastic. This is what you call an intelligent conversation. It's the type that doesn't occur unless the person you're talking to is interested in finding out how smart you are. This is delightful. It's what being an adult member of society is all about. I've missed this. Not direct interests, no. But they will be forced to confront the question of whether they will allow the birth of a dominant state or put a stop to it. A dominant state? Yes. If the Reich, situated in the center of the continent, eliminates the Republic, we will have not a relative advantage but absolute superiority. I can consider this to be similar to how it was possible for Imperial Germany to defeat France and the Russian Empire. Was the British Empire stupid enough to let that happen? If it had been, that island nation would be treated like a backwater by now. Instead, they participated in the war because they understood the severity of the situation. Won't the great powers of this world join the battle as their national interest dictates? So if we can't get rid of the Republic quickly, in a war that doesn't give other nations enough time to interfere, the fighting will trigger a domino effect of other countries getting involved. I see. You may be right, but isn't the alternative that the Republic ends up the dominant state? They shouldn't want that either, surely. Nyeh. I didn't say enough, so he filled in for me. If I assume he's taking my youthful appearance into consideration, I've been pitied. I can't make any more mistakes. Hang in there. Look him straight in the eye and answer clearly. I agree. That's why I think they'll try to make it so both the Empire and the Republic fall. You mean other countries will intervene? Yes. I imagine it will start with financial assistance to the Republic. Other conceivable methods include providing them with weapons and dispatching volunteer troops. The Lend-Lease Act was similar to that. Oh, anyway. Think of the famous Lend-Lease policy and how wars are financed. Okay, editor's note here, although my own mind kind of beat them to it. Lend-Lease, a wartime service that allows mainly allied countries to rent everything from weapons and supplies to bases and land. The key word is rent, so they would only be borrowing. But to the opposite side, it doesn't matter if these are rentals or not. If the enemy's war potential increases, then that's a problem. Everything is supposed to be returned, but as you can see from the example of the Soviet Union, sometimes failing to pay back the United States, things basically have to be offered with the assumption of taking a loss. Okay, so continuing with the text. Think of the famous Lend-Lease Act policy and how wars are financed. English and France won. I think they mean England. So England and France won, but they were still in a precarious position by the end. Considering that, the Empire and the Republic would have their fun little war, and the natural result would be for everyone else to intervene right when the pair had exhausted one another. If they wanted to, they could even pretend to be good Samaritans about it. Ah, I'm beginning to see what you mean. Yes, I would think the general plan of the other powers would be to lend large amounts of money to the Republic, and then intervene to take down both of us in the end. States are honestly so evil. They take good people and turn them into members of an evil death cult. We need to consider their potential for grossly warping people's true natures. For example, the hateful Soviet Union and East Germany, their secret police caused massive harm to human nature. Behold society's fear under the eyes of the Stasi. Freedom. Give them mental freedom. It's high time the human race realizes that individualism is the only path that will save the world. And if the Empire overwhelms the Republic, it's very likely that its national security policies would say to team up with other powers and intervene directly. Even if they can't do that, they may not hesitate to intervene on their own. The noble position of freedom of thought may be important, but I can't take this intellectual conversation lightly. I have to keep up the appearance of stating well-thought-out views. I see. That's a fascinating conjecture. How do you think we should handle things, then? Well, I haven't come up with a plan. Actually, when I have ideas, I submit them. If I could give him one now, it would be a seed for my advancement, but unfortunately, I lack the military expertise. Well, perhaps military creativity should be left to Napoleon and Hannibal. Editor's note: Napoleon Bonaparte, France's great revolutionary leader and a soldier and a politician. Just like Germany's fellow with the toothbrush mustache, they're referring to Adolf Hitler, he's an example of how an outsider manipulated the powers that be in order to seize power. This one lost, but he is well regarded, so you won't get thrown to jail for talking about him in France. Alright, now then. As for Hannibal, he was a general that basically tore apart the entire Roman Empire in its final death throes. They don't have an editor's note for that, but I'll insert one for you. And his tactics are also well regarded. Anyway, continuing with the text. As a good peace-loving individual, there is nothing wrong with that. So I will learn from history and try to make peace, and if that is impossible, I would make limiting attrition a top priority. You mean you wouldn't try to win? People will question your will to fight. Yeah, he's right. That was an awfully careless thing to say. In the manner of a university professor, I spoke a bit too passionately. I can't believe I would say something that brings my will to fight into question in front of the director of the service corps in the general staff. Of all people, why him? Was it really my mouth that just said that? That was such a huge mistake. I want to shoot my mouth off. Okay, that's an interesting way to phrase that. Shooting your mouth off literally means talking when you shouldn't, so I guess that's a poorly translated joke of some kind. What he should be saying is either I want to shoot myself or something like that. Anyway, continuing. This could hurt my career. No. I once heard that cowards get overworked on the front lines. This is very bad, truly bad. Somehow, without letting any distress show on my face, I need to indirectly state in an utterly calm tone that this is not my intention. At the same time, I'll probably still be at risk unless I say something kind of brave to show off my fighting spirit. In a literal sense, yes, General. But I don't mean that we shouldn't aim for victory. It's a problem of definitions. We must deconstruct our assumptions. And go on. Yes, sir. I believe that if we aren't defeated, we should define that as an imperial victory, since our national defense plan would have worked. So in your opinion, how do we achieve this victory? We carry out a thorough bloodletting and crush the enemy's ability to continue fighting. Tanya seemed to specifically choose words soldiers like to hear: carry out, thorough, crush, groping for a way to speak realistically while projecting that she was full of fighting spirit. You mean annihilating the enemy's entire field army? Annihilating their field army? Well, that would be ideal, but it's not an easy task. In other words, this question is a trap. In order to show him I'm not just taking a hard line because I think that's what he wants to hear, I have to dare to disagree. That would be ideal, but quite difficult, I imagine. Perhaps we should make attrition of enemy human resources our goal and devote ourselves to positional warfare defense. Can we win that way? I don't know, but we won't lose. And saving up enough extra energy to deliver a decisive blow at some point would increase our strategic flexibility. I can't declare we can win, but if this is the best thing I can say so he doesn't interpret my answer as saying we'll lose. I put the word decisive blow in there as insurance. I need to keep making comments that show my motivation to sock it to the other guys. How intriguing. But what would you do if the enemy arrives at the same strategy? Now's the time to be assertive. Once someone shows an interest in you, the final impression they take should be the strongest. If that's the case, I need to make my aggression clear and gloss over the extremely inconvenient truth that I'm lacking in the will to fight department. Yes, having considered that possibility, I propose switching our main strategy on the battlefield to infantry defense and mage offense. Mages may have destructive power and impact, but I don't think they're suitable for capturing positions. I agree. However, the objective isn't to occupy, but to eliminate enemy soldiers. To put it another way, the combat maneuvers would be carried out not to expand our sovereignty over enemy land, but to exhaust and eliminate enemy countrymen. We need to acknowledge the reality that in an all-out war, cutting off the root of the enemy's ability to continue fighting is the only path to victory. and we should develop measures to achieve that. In World War I, Germany slaughtered Russia and hit France and England hard. They were overwhelming the other countries on the tactical level. The biggest reason it eventually lost was that it ran out of strength. They lost too many men. When, in addition to France and England, they had to fight the United States, it was precisely because they knew they couldn't win that the German General Staff gave up. They realized that even if their lines hadn't broken, they could no longer continue fighting and had no choice but to accept their defeat. So they lost. There is an important lesson to be learned from this memory. That is, how defeat looks in total war. No matter how well you compete on the lines, if your country runs out of manpower, you can't continue the war. It's not a question of mentality, but the limits set by the laws of physics. As such, I'm convinced our main purpose should be to exhaust enemy soldiers with tactical disruption and penetrating raids from aerial mages. Honestly, I think penetrating raids are crazy talk, but as long as there's a slim possibility that mages could succeed with them, they're worth proposing. Besides, I wouldn't be the one doing them. If it's just unreasonable blather, I can keep it up all day. Take a look at Sugene. I don't know who that is. Tsugene. Sugene. Didn't that idiot get promoted at home for doing whatever he wanted in Manchuria and Mongolia? Or the general who forced the Battle of Imphal? They called him the best spy for the Allies. Full of shit Gucci. Brute Gucci. Or wait, was he the I'm dying scammer general? I'm not sure what they're referencing here, and it's either Gucci or Juche, which is the ideology of North Korea. I'm not honestly sure what they're referencing here. They really should have an editor's note. Anyway, continuing. Didn't he say he was dying and then get money in an out-of-court settlement? Maybe not. I can't remember. Well, whatever. If I can be that irresponsible, life will be a cakewalk. Unfortunately, I'm a good person. Since I haven't abandoned that much of my humanity, I'll draw the line at this plan, which should be doable based on my experience thus far. Ah, I'm such a sensible person. I'm just a bundle of good intentions. Yeah, I'm undoubtedly justice incarnate. I'm a long-suffering martyr, boasting an utterly wholesome character who seeks goodness and peace. The mage mission wouldn't be support? In positional warfare, mages have firepower on par with artillery, and agility that outstrips infantry. They're the ideal branch for hunting enemy soldiers. And I'm told that they're referencing also the World War I flying circuses as well, but I digress. Continuing. To be honest, mobile defense was tough. I learned very well what a pain it was to combat war junkies. For instance, when I had to fight those named mages up in the north, if there is a god, he should erase that whole bunch before declaring himself. Any species that enjoys killing its own members is insane. In other words, there's the enemy of my explanation. There's the end of my. In other words, there's the end of my explanation of why being X isn't a god. What can I do to escape this devil? If the devil roams a godless world, we're basically in Armageddon, right? If you want to win while minimizing your own losses, then perhaps the attritional containment doctrine. Mages are best for that. I see. You sure know how to sell it. My humble thanks, sir. Now I should probably back off a bit, but his reaction's not bad. He's hunching slightly to write something on one of his documents, so it doesn't look like he's going to press me further. This is great. If I can talk my way out of things, perhaps I should consider a career as a negotiator. But my area of expertise is human resources. Going for depth gets you a better salary than breadth, but maybe I should start planning my life after the war. Maybe I should learn a trade. Now that I think of it, I will definitely have to earn some qualifications. How can I change jobs when my resume is Mage with a wealth of combat experience can handle a fight to the death any time, any place. Like, what kind of gang are you trying to join? No one will hire me after the war at this rate. Every era has the same issue with finding occupations for ex-soldiers. If Tanya doesn't invest in herself now, she will have trouble later. It's precisely for that reason that she's going to the library, to learn about laws so she can earn a legal professional qualification or something similar that will keep her fed in the future. So hypothetically, if you were to use mages as the linchpin of this attritional containment doctrine, how many would you want? Maybe I shouldn't be planning my life in one corner of my brain. I answer the question without really considering its aim. I'm sure a battalion is the right size. It wouldn't be a huge logistical burden, and it has the minimum force required. Interesting. Well, I'll have to think about it. Young people's opinions are always beneficial, in their own way. Thank you, sir. Not realizing what just happened is a basic error. Normally, Tanya would definitely feel something was off and try to somehow avoid the incoming trouble. But this time, she's careless. Yes, even though carelessness caused all the most horrible errors in life. The Imperial Capital, at the desk of the Deputy Director of the Service Corps in the General Staff. When in doubt, learn from the lessons of the past. The military man Zatur has learned so much from history that he's criticized for being too much like a scholar. But he does it because the strategic principles of the past contain pieces that can still be applied. And because Brigadier General von Zatur is so familiar with history, he has a nose for recognizing indescribable yet fundamental change. He has learned from history to sense a shift in the tides. You could call it a feeling that the existing paradigm won't quite work for dealing with the national defense strategy issues the Empire is currently facing. He believed the teachings of history could be used as a guiding light, and they told him change would be coming. The difficult-to-grasp question of what will change is a distraction for most Imperial soldiers. Given that most of them are expected to deal with the circumstances right in front of them, that's no surprise. Considering the traditional way of thinking in the Imperial Army, which only cares about how well each individual carries out their missions, Zatur is certainly heretical. But regardless of his academic leanings, he has proven himself with outstanding achievements. The Imperial Army is open to welcoming all kinds of people as long as they can demonstrate skill as officers. And that's precisely why Zatur is respected, even within the General Staff. The sight of him, lost in thought at his desk, has become a type of featured attraction at the General Staff office. And no one thinks to interfere. The staffers who work under him are used to seeing him open up a philosophical text and sink deep into thought once his work is done. Ever since the war began, they have all been busy with urgent tasks, but now that both the northern and western fronts have stabilized, the lull creates some spare time so they can finally breathe. None of the officers have rested since the war began, so the General Staff officers are finally given a short break as well. The younger staffers dash off in high spirits for the beer hall, where they make liberal use of their salaries, because how else will they spend them? The officer staffers take off as well, finally getting to spend time relaxing with their families. What both groups have in common is that they take their first vacations in a while and enjoy it in full. But the day they return, they find their superior officer, who clearly hasn't slept a wink, immobile and staring feverishly at his hastily scribbled notes. The officer who remained on duty tells the puzzled staff that about half a day ago, the Brigadier General returned from the War College and has been scowling at his notes ever since, as if he has forgotten everything else in the world. Puzzling indeed. Truly puzzling. General von Zetour? The field officers can't bear to see him like this, but even when they try to talk to him, his bloodshot eyes only wander over the notes spread on his desk. There isn't any other way for him to process the shock he's received. At first, he thought she was just an officer with an interesting, novel idea, and that her proposal, which he had written down, was just another way of looking at things. As he thought more about it on his way back to the General Staff office, he was impressed by her view that the conflict between exterior and interior lines might reach a head. But as he continued to ponder these ideas, he understood that his thoughts were beginning to grasp something. Then he realized that even if he didn't want to, he had to admit that the notes strewn across his desk contained an inconvenient truth. He's shocked that she can speak so lucidly on the direction the war will take, even when the General Staff is unsure. Where did such an accurate understanding come from? As far as Zetour knew, Brigadier General von Rüdersdorf was the one most sharply hinting that the tides of war would change. But even Rüdersdorf didn't seem able to see things as clearly as First Lieutenant Degrichov had proclaimed them. She said that this was a world war, and that total war would be inevitable. Anyone else hearing that would say she was deluded, but he has the feeling she just put into words the changes that the Federation and the Dominion were hinting at. She fully understands the something that both Zetour and Rüdersdorf were feeling, though they were unable to explain it themselves. It's a borderline delusional plan, but strangely persuasive. She said it as if she'd already seen it happen, and Zetour had to agree with the analysis and understanding of the situation that provided the foundation for her conviction. Suddenly, he realizes that a number of staffers are eyeing him with concern. I can't afford to make a scene in front of my men. His usual officer values clamor, but he has received such an intellectual shock that he is still reeling from the after effects. Not in the mood to shrug it off as nothing, he lets his actual feelings slip. It's world war, men. Do you really think we'll go to war against the entire world? Huh. The lower-ranking officer's expression says, what's gotten into him? As awkward looks appear on everyone's faces, Zetour wants to tell them he can't believe it either. But that would be more awkward. Besides, his experience and knowledge judge the young brain's horrific picture of the future to be a valid prediction. Yes, Zetour knows the words of this child, who would look more natural cheerfully laughing, can't be laughed off. They're prophetic. He heard of that officer, that little girl, during the War College admission process. He felt lucky to have run into her on campus, but when he tried to test her in conversation, the results were a Pandora's box. Sorry, I can't reveal the source, but I want you to consider this a possibility. Okay, editor's note here. A Pandora's box references an item in Greek mythology, which was basically, the tale goes, Pandora was given a gift from the gods and told that if she opens it a little bit, then all good things will flow from it. But if she opens it all the way, then she will unleash untold devastation on the world, and she opened it because she was given it and she didn't follow the instructions. So that's what it is, Pandora's box. Anyway, continuing. It's an awfully extreme prediction, radical even. Though he is given orders, he understands his subordinate's perplexity far more than he would like. Even he hadn't fully considered the possibility of the entire world and the Reich plunging into war, and why should he have? How extreme could you get within the bounds of reason? And radical was exactly right. But the more he thinks about it, the more horrible the possibilities that flicker across his mind. Something like that could never happen. I'll find a hole in it somewhere, he thinks. But, hypothetically, and only hypothetically, what if? What if she were right? If in that case, the Empire would have to go to war against the whole world. Literally. If that happens, it wouldn't be a bad idea to give her a battalion. If we can't win unless we go insane, then we'll just have to do that. Then we'll have to do just that. And unleash the dogs of war and madness. The only thing I didn't want to be when I grew up was a horrible person. Suddenly aware of his own thoughts, Zatur is shocked. Send a child to war? That would be the worst sort of shame for a soldier. Yet he was assuming it as a given. I regret being so incompetent. The position of a high-ranking general staff member in the military is a specialist position. But you can't only be a specialist. What the Imperial Army General Staff seeks are military specialists who are simultaneously generalists with insight into a broad range of related fields. Of course, at the very least, you have to understand the combat situations as well as the rear. For that reason, officers on the elite track frequently encounter transfer milestones. Major General von Legren, stationed in the hub of this activity, personnel at the General Staff Office, is used to transfers. After all, from the perspective of his career, as important as the role of section chief in personnel is, it's only a milestone on the way to his next position. In the Imperial War College Admissions Committee meeting, he showed himself to be keeping an eye on multiple departments, and that was assessed favorably in the General Staff Office, although it was a valuation of his familiarity with the other departments as a generalist, not his skepticism of the candidate, which was what he was hoping they would consider. In any case, you can never have too many skilled generalists in a war. Before long, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and to Lieutenant Colonel von Legren, who has risen at a quicker pace than usual, they offer a position as a high-ranking staff officer in the operations division of the General Staff. Although his role isn't specified, a position under a high-ranking officer where he would get to be involved in the drafting of various overarching plans is proof of the Army's high opinion of him. And right upon reporting for duty, the lieutenant colonel would get a taste of the traditional slave driving. The Operations Division is a body at the center of the Army within the General Staff. The General Staff building stands in a quiet, prime location in the Imperial capital. Its exterior tranquility, appropriate to its accumulated history, bellies its awfully hectic interior. Congratulations on your promotion, Colonel von Legren. We're happy to have you. Thank you, General von Rudersdorf. Well, we're going to work you like a horse, you know. No matter how many people we get, it's never enough. Please, have a seat. Felicitations upon arrival and promotion. He has taken his orders, gathered up his things, and with his bag in hand, entered operations, where he is met by the deputy director of the division, General von Rudersdorf himself. Despite the long strings of hard-working days familiar to every general staff officer, the general grins energetically and urges him to take a seat so they won't waste any more time. The moment Legren sits down, Rudersdorf launches into the topic at hand, as if they really have not a moment to lose. Okay, Colonel, this is sudden, but I'd like you to go straight to the Northern Front. Here are your orders. Though he knows of the general's reputation for quick decisions, even Legren doesn't expect to be dispatched immediately upon reporting for duty. As you know, the strategic confusion has had serious repercussions on the way things are going up there. But Legren wears the staff braid too. It isn't just a decoration. He instantly adapts his mindset to the situation and refocuses it. In almost no time, he's listening closely to his superior, leaving no word unnoted. Well, it's no wonder given that we're suddenly performing a large-scale mobilization for an offensive on a front where we weren't planning on attacking. The Imperial Army is paying a steep price for misjudging the situation. On top of tensions to the west, the massive unexpected deployments of the Great Army are having dire consequences. It's easy to imagine the difficulties the Army in all theaters are facing as a result. The strength of interior line strategy is movement across domestic territory, but it can't be pulled off without extensive preparation. If conditions deteriorate, they can't avoid chaos. There is nothing so atrocious and wasteful for a nation as people who aren't fulfilling their duties getting paid in positions they aren't suited for. Naturally, we have reshuffled. As a result, most of the general staff members who advocated for one big push have been dismissed or demoted. Of course, the ones who did their duty without any gross errors didn't get it quite so bad, but the current mood is definitely favorable for promoting promising talents. It can be said that Legren himself, considering his rapid advancement and important post in the general staff, is one of those who is benefiting from the situation. It's ironic that we're short-handed, but it doesn't mean we can give a promising officer like you somewhere to flex your muscles. That's why we're having you go up north. So my orders are to gain an understanding of the situation. All things considered, the reason a general staff member from operations would be sent to the north would be inspection. Even a new staffer can understand that orders like this under these circumstances mean the higher-ups want data for long-term planning. And it's all according to the basic strategy the Empire traditionally keeps in mind, of breaking through two fronts to the best of their ability. That is, one of the fronts will surely need to be prioritized, and the higher-ups probably want information to decide which one. Exactly. The Western Front has stabilized, but we still don't want to be fighting on two fronts for very long. So we need to decide which one to settle? Exactly. After you see what's happening up north, go make observations to the west. The general nods as if to say, very well. As far as Legren can tell, his response was satisfactory. Yes, sir, I'll go immediately to the north. High-ranking staffers keep a bag packed with a change of clothes next to their desks so they can be ready to follow orders at any time and leave at a moment's notice. A grab bag, effectively. Legren learned from senior officers, so when he takes his orders, he grabs the bag he faithfully packed according to tradition and walks out the operations division door. Of course, he never imagined that his preparations would come in handy so soon. Good. Oh, and Colonel, take a look at this while you're on your way up. What is it? A paper Zatour passed along. It's worth a read. Understood. Then, if you'll excuse me, sir, I'll be going. Lieutenant Colonel von Legren leaves straight from there, taking a military vehicle to the station. He boards a train bound for the north, which departs not too much later. He sits in the first-class compartment reserved for high-ranking military officers, takes out the paper, and reads the title, Predictions on the Shape and Direction of the Current War. For a moment, he remembers the Deputy Director of the Service Corps Brigadier General von Zatour's scholarly face, and the title brings back fond memories of the texts accompanying lectures on the history of the war. Zatour's habit of keeping thought is famous enough that Legren has heard of it. So perhaps it makes an intriguing point, and that's why General von Rudersdorf read it and recommended it to me. That is Legren's interpretation, but as he reads, his eyes glaze over. Not only that, as he reads further, his expression grows confused. It's the emotional disturbance of fear and astonishment. He can't help but his shock, as if he has just been whacked in the head. What is this? Is this the current war? Wait, is this kind of war even possible? His mind murmurs, profoundly doubtful. It is. The answer comes from his professional consciousness. As far as Legren knows, Zatour isn't the type of officer to go around shouting wild nonsense. On the contrary, he's rather restrained. It is the General Staff's common view that reality should be analyzed and understood, that scholarly yet realistic officer is warning them of a world that is, simply put, one of global war. Outrageous! How happy he would be if he could just laugh it off. But Legren's head in his hands, moaning to him in spite of himself, is forced to confront reality. These kind of strategy papers always entail furious debate. As a member of the General Staff, he is aware what a dilemma exterior lines versus interior lines is. Naturally, he understands how world war is possible if the parties faced with the Empire's interior line strategy were to discuss how to beat it. In that case, this is saying that the current war will inevitably develop into a global conflict? The Empire would be under siege. The problem of its fragile national defense environment, stemming from political factors, gives those in charge of it a never-ending headache. It's why they are still concerned about national defense despite having a military superior to those of nearby powers. But the countries encircling the empire also have the security issue of having such a powerful neighbor. Naturally, the empire anticipated them to construct a unified front, employ an interior line strategy with the aim of dividing the empire's forces and thus tipping the balance of power. Those chains are the thing threatening the empire. In order to crush the siege slowly strangling them, it has turned to interior line strategy as well. It also cut off its diplomacy efforts, agreements such as its alliance with the Kingdom of Aldoa and its non-aggression pact with the Russi Federation, long ago. Normally, in a situation like this, most countries should have been hesitant to negotiate, fearing a local flare-up. But is that really the case? If the Entente alliance were to drop out, Francos, with an active conflict zone, would be forced to resist the Empire's pressure on its own. The question of whether the cunning Commonwealth would obediently ally with Francos is another that can't be answered easily. To maintain the balance of power, it would probably join in support, but it is entirely possible they might aim to take both the Franco Republic and the Empire down at the last moment. Once that was pointed out for him, he can't deny the possibility that all the other sparks blaze up in a chain reaction. Russi and Francos are allies, historically, but a rift has grown between them over communism. The Empire seized that opening to make their non-aggression pact with the Russi Federation. From the Francos' point of view, that pact means it has to count on the Entente alliance to restrain the Empire with a second front. And that is why the Empire is stuck fighting both the Entente alliance and the Republic. And if, fatally, the fall of both the Republic and the Empire is the only outcome of this war the other powers will accept, it's possible that the one thing they won't allow is a hegemonic state overwhelming all the others. With his knowledge and experience, Legren can hear the gates of world war opening. It's possible. By God, it's possible. And then, when we wage war against the world, the concept of total war comes naturally to mind, along with something else, something unfathomable but snickering like a witch. Total war, when a country finds it necessary to mobilize all of its power to accomplish their goals in battle. The desire to refute the paper suddenly swells up inside him, but the inference it makes is based on truth. The nature of war will fundamentally change. Ammunition and fuel consumption will drastically increase. The things he saw and heard of at the General Staff Office backed all of that up. It's undoubtedly the truth, especially considering the Western Army Group has already gone over the projected weapons and ammunition usage in a head-on clash against another world power. A striking amount of combat casualties. Yeah, that's also right. I heard our recruiting speed is already hitting a wall. We're losing so many of our men, we are losing so many more men than expected that the peacetime recruitment plan is already failing. We would have to fight under the assumption that we will expend large numbers of weapons and soldiers. There would be vast consumption of personnel and waste of material on a scale that could destroy the nation's economy. Yes, consumption of human lives, not even sacrifice, but simple numerical consumption. Will this insane struggle go on until one side or other collapses under the burden? He is suggesting a type of war in which people and things are consumed until you go completely bankrupt, plus the idea that this would be taking place on a global scale. Normally, such a prediction would be considered delusional. If I agree with this, what awaits us is a horrifying world where people will be numbers, disposable products. But this argument has a lot of parts that seem plausible. Still, when I think about what it would mean to accept it, no, of course it's possible to criticize both the total war and world war theories, but for some reason, this still feels far too realistic. I want to deny it, but there is something in here that is undeniable. But why? Why can't I deny it? I have this bizarre sensation sticking in my throat. What is this weird feeling? I should be somehow familiar with both total war and world war. There's no way I could be familiar and with awful things like that, but I definitely have some memory of them. It's like I have a memory in some other sense. Somewhere I'm forgetting something. No, something is bothering me. Did I see it in some other paper? No, that's not it. I just now heard the words total war and world war for the first time. I just learned them. Then, are there some similar concepts? I don't remember anything like that. The closest thing was, yes, something I read in a science fiction novel. So if it derived from some experience I had? I barely have any frontline experience, though. I was in the field up until I reached first lieutenant, and afterwards I was stationed in the Commonwealth as military attaché. I've been serving in the rear. Did I hear something in the Commonwealth? I wrote a mountain of reports while I was there. I remember them all very well, but I don't recall any concepts like those. Am I overthinking this? I'm sure I've seen some parts of this before, though. Even in the middle of a war, no. Precisely because it is wartime, capable staff are a must-have. That's why money is being poured like water into staff education. As one of the students benefiting from this funding, First Lieutenant Tanya Degrachev is on the traditional staff trip as part of her military education. Mainen is a well-known hot spring getaway. Though its bathing district has made it famous as a health resort since ancient times, it's located right next to a harsh mountain region that always has a coat of snow. On one of the nearest mountains overlooking this peaceful town, Tanya is among the War College students getting put through the mill. I just want to say, oh dear God, we're having a freaking Hot Springs episode. What the hell? Anyway, continuing. I'm glad they cut this from the anime. Anyway, here we go. She is the only female and the only child who made it through the admission process. Honestly, she doesn't sense as much subjectively, but as a biological fact, it can't be denied. But in the far, far gender-free world of ladies first, Tanya, with her outwardly girlish appearance, is albeit only relatively blessed compared to the other students. A simple example is when they spent the night in a village on their hike. The men not only slept in a pile, but they were forced to dig trenches to do it in. Fearing the army's reputation, the superior officer allowed only Tanya to borrow a bed from one of the locals. She was also allowed to use the local army facilities. Basically, apart from the mage branch, the army is a man's world. And actually, even most of the mages remain men. Of course, there are rules and regulations about the treatment of female officers, and naturally, the The dense army regulations you would expect from the Empire include provisions on how female soldiers are expected to behave. That said, most of the few female soldiers who existed before mages were from the imperial family. Drafted under that assumption, the regulations envision an imperial princess and her attendants rendering only nominal service, so they feel outrageously out of date. As you might imagine, the rules for mages on the front lines, where the members of the imperial family would never be sent, have been overhauled in recent years to make them more practical in combat conditions. The regulations for treatment of women officers in the rear, however, still read much like an old-fashioned guide to manners, since most of the women in those positions were nobles or imperial royals. And since so few female officers continue on to the War College to begin with, no one has bothered to update the War College rulebook. The regulations drawn up for imperial family women remain wholly intact. Even if they are so outdated, you want to ask how many decades or even centuries ago they were written. Any rule in the Empire that hasn't been amended or abolished is enforceable. Maybe it could be counted as an adverse effect of bureaucracy, but the law in the Empire is to follow the rules that exist, even if they privilege certain people. For that reason, they have practically rolled out a red carpet for Tanya on this trip. Oh my. The purpose of the trip is simple: endurance training under extreme conditions that dull the ability to think. Tanya knows that most of the operations that staffers running on fumes come up with are Sujin-esque nuclear landmines. I have no idea what Sujin is, and I honestly wish they would put in an editor's note here. I don't know what this means. Anyway, continuing with the text. So it makes no sense to the instructors to treat First Lieutenant Degrichov like a woman when she's strong enough and has a wealth of combat experience. And there are no stipulations in the now classical regulations concerning women War College students about how to treat magic officers. In other words, they can't ignore the quote, women officers should be provided with appropriate accommodations, end quote, regulation. But if there's no rule stating, quote, women mage officers should not be made to carry heavy loads, end quote, they can weigh her down just as much as the others. For that reason alone, since mages can use support formulas, she was ordered to attend in full gear with a dummy heavy machine gun. Essentially, go climb a mountain in your normal full gear plus a nearly 50-kilogram machine gun to boot. If Tanya suppresses the urge to cry child abuse, there's no legal issue with it. Of course, there's no hiking trail. They are in the region where the Alpine troops train. You can only conclude that the one who designed this system was an absolute and utter sadist. You can only, even the lightly equipped Alpine infantry is groaning about this uphill trek, but the students are being made to do it in full combat gear. But teleologically, it isn't a mistake. Teleologically, I don't know what that word means. I should look it up. Anyway, continuing. Still, wouldn't it be better to not completely exhaust the staff? She can't help but think. Victor, say an enemy built a defensive firing position on that hill. You're ordered to make a swift advance on them with a battalion. But the education itself is thorough. The tired officers are mercilessly quizzed about hypothetical combat orders. Propose a strategy. A firing position on that hill? If it was up there, we wouldn't be able to break through on the ground. Would we? We wouldn't be able to break through or go to ground and find cover, would we? We'd either have to make a dejected retreat or use the heavy artillery to pummel them from a distance, or maybe have mages charge in. It would be difficult to break through in order to move swiftly forward. I propose going around. But apparently the impossibility of a breakthrough is as far as Lieutenant Victor's weary brain can get. He will employ the textbook detour strategy. Well, It's true that, from the looks of it, we would never succeed. That said, I can't imagine going around working any better. There's not very much cover, and the enemy is on higher ground. Before you could move swiftly forward, you'd be shot like sitting ducks. Then try it if you can, huh? If you think you can get around them in this steep terrain, I'd like to see you try it, dipshit. I'm telling you to look at the topography. Naturally, the instructor's angry shout sounds tough, but Tanya doesn't have time to savor the sweetness of another's mistake. Degrishav, what would you do? Damn it! You owe me, Lieutenant Victor. If you had just answered properly, no one would have gotten yelled at. She wanted to glare at him, but as long as he's at a loss, the heat is on him. Even if Victor is useless, he is a good lightning rod. I should use him like that, not tear him down. Right now, I need to prioritize getting through this first situation. Do we happen to have heavy artillery support, sir? It's important to get a basic handle on things. I can't imagine an infantry battalion would be bringing infantry guns into this mountainous region, but if the division has its own artillery, we could expect support. Or the corps artillery would be fine, but knowing whether we have support or not is crucial to the scenario. Although I'm sure he wants us to think about what we would do if we didn't have any. Still, I didn't show that I'm trying to confirm what cards are in my hand. Still, if I didn't show that I'm trying to confirm what cards are in my hand, he'll yell at me. Why didn't you consider heavy artillery support? For sure, I get it, but it's stupid. We'll say you don't. My first idea is to make a large retreat and then maneuver around along a different ridge line. Then the best thing to do is avoid unnecessary casualties. Luckily, depending on the ridge line, it won't even take any longer than any other tactic. More importantly, there's no need to launch a reckless attack. Ordering a charge against a position with a good field of fire is not only reckless, but cruel. Can guys like that get jobs in the general staff? All I can say is I hope not. In any case, the only way to beat firepower with flesh is by having more soldiers than bullets. And if you don't have that kind of time? My second idea is to employ skirmish tactics with mages and infantry. The mages can take out the emplacement, and the infantry can back them up. Aerial mages could definitely capture the position. We'd have been ready to take casualties, but it would be much better than trying to break through with infantry alone. I mean, hell, I'm an Imperial aerial mage. If you're asking me what I would do if I was in command, then it's not unreasonable for me to have mages with my infantry battalion. Well, maybe my answer was a little sneaky, but that's fine. Now how would you capture the position if you only had infantry? Huh? Capture it with only infantry, sir? Did he trap me? Before Tanya knows it, he's ordering her to win with nothing but infantry. Yes, I'll give you a minute. If you don't want to sleep outside tonight, better answer quick. Now he's just talking nonsense. If it were possible to capture positions with infantry, we wouldn't be spending all this time worrying about positional warfare. You're seriously telling me to take that hill under those conditions? With no engineers, no mages, no support? Are you just telling me to do this 3 human bullets style? I don't even have to think about it. Sir, I think capturing it under those conditions would be impossible. For a second, all of her classmates' expressions change. Most of them were mulling over the problem, and the word impossible is a shock. After all, that word could put the instructor in a bad mood. It's a comment that could lower Tanya's academic standing. I've got a bad feeling. Why couldn't he have picked on Captain Uyghur or one of those guys? I want to put my head in my hands and moan about my bad luck, but I can't because my hands are full of heavy machine gun. What? What do you mean? Like a certain Empire of the Sun, our army has a reputation for bayonet charges, and if the opponent's interdiction fire is weak, maybe something could be accomplished with them. But rushing a Republican Army defensive position with bayonets would just be kicking a hornet's nest. A night assault is conceivable, but a mission on battalion scale in the dark mountains could end with all of us getting killed. If we think that far and still can't calculate a decent chance of success, the answer is that it's impossible. What is a staff member? Going back to basics and considering my duties and obligations, I believe capturing the hill is impossible. She makes sure she has some remarks ready to shift responsibility. People learn from mistakes. She isn't about to repeat her error of talking too much to the brigadier general in the reading room. She will make impossibility a factor of her duty, not her lack of fighting spirit. A staff member's duty is to pursue the best possible plan. In other words, according to the general staff, capturing that emplacement is impossible. It can't be done. That's what I'm saying, anyhow. Of course, a staff member has to come up with operations that will win, but there are any number of obligations that can be used as excuses. But piling up casualties in vain would be the most abhorrent thing I could do. If he shouts at me that we prioritize victory over soldiers' lives, I won't know what to say, but at least I've done everything I can to avoid looking like I have no fighting spirit. In the academy, we were told over and over, and, for some reason, over again, to love our troops. Weirdly, now that I think of it, I feel like they emphasize this the most when talking to me. It would be a shame if it was because they thought I didn't understand that we have to educate our subordinates since we can't choose them. Anyhow, I have my excuse. My cause is just enough. I can stand tall this time and say what I think. In light of that, I would say that in this case, attacking the hill should be avoided. The instructor turns a glare at her, trying to figure out how serious she is. I have zero intention of screwing around. Any businessman can stare back with that look in his eyes. The only other thing you need is the nerve to not back down under the intense gaze of soldiers and the like. In other words, being used to it is half the battle. The other half is having a heart that believes in inner freedom. A heart that believes in inner freedom. All right, I'll make a note of it. Okay, we march. So he's just going to make a note of it after all. I guess soldiers don't like the way businessmen think. What should I do? I want to believe I faked him out okay, but I have the feeling getting noted isn't a good thing. And thus ends Chapter 4, which was the War College chapter. Chapter 5, the Primeval Battalion, appears to be the final chapter of Volume 1, and that will be recorded for later next week. In the meantime, I'd say my thoughts on this chapter, it was productive, to say the least. So, Tanya, as an entity in this universe, is now beginning to make far, far more influential decisions and actually have a name for herself amongst the general staff and the army. The enemy know of her by reputation, but not by name, because of her talents. But now she's actually able to display her abilities in terms of general strategic planning. And she's also showing us, due to a bit of a mistake and talking brashly to one of the generals at the library, her actions there are going to result in her getting a battalion on the front line when all she ever wanted was to basically be some moderately high-level staffer in the back, in the interior. So she's basically shot herself in the foot right here. No matter how you slice it, she wanted to be away from the front line in a high-powered position, but now she's going to be on the front line, facing death every day, and giving orders with high risk to her. Like, it's one of the bizarre things about this entire universe. Her innate abilities make it so that she's skilled at just about anything and everything. But the fact that she's so skilled is what's getting her pushed towards the front line. If she had no skill set, then she could be some low-level person in the back, sure, especially given her age. Like, but the fact that she's got this innate strength and knowledge, not to mention all the knowledge of future events and wars that haven't even happened yet in this universe. She has the skill set and knowledge of a 40-year-old businessman. In addition to that, she has all the knowledge of everything that happened in the First and Second World Wars, as well as all the military conflicts that followed. And to top it all off, she's been studying in this world and preparing to be successful. I mean, yeah, if the war ended today, she would probably be doing something else, undoubtedly, and succeeding just the same. Not all men are created equal, and she's proving that she is among the best. Age be damned. I mean, the whole thing with this book promoting meritocracy as the ultimate value, the ultimate human value, it really connects with me, honestly. In any case, from here out, I kind of know what's probably going to happen next, but I'm not going to spoil anything. Suffice it to say, this has been a damn good book, and I still have one chapter to go, but I'm fairly sure the next book itself won't even be published for another month or two, so you might have a bit of a wait, at least once the final chapter's out. In any case, I'm going to end this here, so thanks for listening, and have a wonderful day.